just received a prison email from a guy who's been locked up since back when I served time, and a guy that I never expected to hear from again, which is actually quite crazy to think about. This was a guy who I served time with in the very beginning of my 7-year prison sentence, somebody I was in the jail with, somebody who I've spoken about here before on After Prison Show a handful of times, somebody I've even corresponded with since being released and have shared that here on After Prison Show, but somebody who is never coming home, who had one of the craziest cases that I ever heard about and ever got to see play out, because I watched his entire court proceeding play out while we were in the jail together, and somebody who I am just hearing from for the first time in a long time. It's been years. Who I'm talking about is a guy who was nicknamed Google. His real name, Aaron Brennan. And a guy who ended up getting sentenced to over 200 and something odd years. I think it was like 216 years in prison, and he didn't even kill anybody. Somebody who was offered a plea deal for 25 years and who turned that down and ended up getting his absolute boot smoked up in the courtroom. And it's just crazy to think, had he taken that plea deal, 25 years? I served 7 years in prison. I've been home now for 10 years. That's 17 years. Buddy would be damn near getting ready to get released, potentially, if he was able to survive that time and not trick it up and run his time up even more. For those of you who don't remember Google, here's his mugshot right here, kind of a goofy looking guy, and a guy who found himself in a world of hurt and trouble due to addiction. I hate to make a justification saying that it was addiction that led him down this dark road that would ultimately have him break into an elderly woman's home with two other individuals, one of which being a minor. But the three of them collectively broke into this old woman's home to rob the house and maybe her. I'm not really sure on the details in relation to what actually led them, or at least I can't remember anymore, what led them to go do this in the first place. Was this a crime of opportunity? Were they tweaked out of their freaking heads and they just did this? Whatever the case, the three of them would break into this elderly woman's home. Story has it, she was duct taped and placed in a bathtub, and the items that were stolen from her home or robbed from her home were something like a freaking toaster oven, a VCR, and just some odds and ends that ain't worth nothing and weren't worth nothing back in the early 2000s, somewhere around 2008, 2009 when this story took place. I don't know how these individuals would end up getting caught. I'm foggy on the details in relation to that. Well, never mind. I actually ran across a news story in relation to their arrest. 3 arrested in Suffolk assault and robbery. The story was published in the newspaper back on March 8th, 2009. I was getting arrested to begin my sentence on December the 20th, 2008. I'd only been in the jail for about 3 months when here came Google, aka Aaron Brennan. Police have arrested 3 people in connection with last week's home invasion, robbery, and assault on a 65-year-old woman that left her with a broken nose and wrist. I remember when this story was shared on the news, they showcased this woman who had 2 black eyes. And the crazy thing about this, the story made the news. All of a sudden, here comes Google into the cell block, which, of course, when he first came in there, that was not his nickname. People were either calling him Brennan or Aaron Brennan. Everybody knew his full government because they had just seen him on the news. But when you think about a story like this, you would imagine that this guy would get dealt with immediately upon coming into the housing unit. Man, y'all robbed and beat up an old woman, broke her nose and her wrist. Bing, 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 bing. You got to be dealt with, you would think. But that didn't take place. And as I look back on it now in hindsight, the reason why it didn't take place was because this guy had a great case for guys in that jail to jump on. Meaning they were going to try to gain any kind of information about this guy's case that they could so that they could be a jailhouse snitch and testify against this guy when he went to trial. To put it in perspective, the night before he went to court, I will never forget this for as long as I live, we were all locked down. He wasn't my cellmate. My cellmate was a kid named Fred. Me and Fred were really good friends. Aaron was a couple of cells down. Maybe he was downstairs. We were upstairs. I can't remember. But after lockdown, after 11 p.m., when people are listening to The Love Below, Joe was listening to Coast with whoever hosted that AM talk show that still comes on. It's actually on YouTube, as a matter of fact, talking about aliens and wild shit like that. After lockdown, you know, people would be laughing and joking, talking from cell to cell. The whole cell block would be kind of having a conversation sometimes. But people started to make fun of Google and the fact that he had court coming up the next morning and that he was about to get his boots smoked. And, you know, he made a comment in relation to, well, nobody's testifying against me, or I ain't got to worry about nobody jumping on my case. And I'll never forget this for as long as I live. There were prisoners who were literally giggling and laughing as they were saying, well, I'm going to court with you tomorrow, Google. Yeah, I'm going too. Oh, and no bullshit. This guy ended up having like 7 or 8 people on his case. I think it was only like 1 or 2 out of our actual cell block, but 1 or 2 was too many. Can you imagine? You're going to court on a situation where they offered you a 25-year plea deal. You're saying you're going to turn that shit down. And I remember talking to this guy before then saying, Google, man, you better take this plea deal. I remember him drawing out detailed like blueprints of the house and the layout and where things were. And he was going to try to fight this case saying that, you know, loopholes or they didn't have the right information or it wasn't him. I don't remember why, but I remember him preparing for this trial. You go to court, you're sitting in the bullpen right next to a guy who's in the same cell block as you, and he is testifying against you. You know, Google comes back from court. These guys come back too, and they just go their separate ways. And Google wasn't built like that. He was tall, taller than me, skinny, but he was a big guy. But he was a timid guy too. You know, if you're going to a situation where you're fighting for your life, and granted, you know, a 25-year prison sentence for what he did was warranted. I feel no sympathy for the fact that, you know, this guy ended up getting his boots smoked because he rolled the dice. It was a stupid thing to do. And, you know, I've said this before too, where, hey, look, you know, if you're offered a plea deal and it's 25 to life and that, you know, that's, you don't want to take that, or a 25-year cap, I think is what it was. And you don't want to take that. Well, shit, take it to trial. Because then at least if you lose, you could appeal it if you've got a grounds to appeal. Google went to court, did not take the plea deal. He came back. The jury recommended 209 years. He was found guilty on everything. He didn't get sentenced right there, but he knew what the jury was recommending. 209 yetage. That is 8 times the plea deal he was offered. When he would end up going to sentencing, he received 216 years. The judge exceeded the guidelines due to the heinous nature of the crime. You've got a freaking picture of a 65-year-old woman with 2 black eyes, a broken wrist and nose. Google rolled the dice and he lost. I kind of got off topic a little bit too real quick. I said, you know, when this guy came into the cell block, he didn't have the nickname Google. But because he acted like he knew everything, acted like he knew he could beat this charge, people started referring to him as Google. Google was relatively new back in 2009. It probably had been around for a while, but smartphones were really just coming out in 2007, 2008. You know, so with that comes Google as well, I think. Anyways, the guy's nickname ended up being Google because he thought he knew everything. Clinton Matthew Ivey, one of Google's co-defendants, he was 30 years old. Google was 22. I'll never forget this guy neither. His nickname was P-Sight. Now, he was not in the same cell block as us. He was in another cell block. He ended up catching an additional 5 years for trying to dig out through the blocks in the wall. But he did take the plea deal. Old P-Sight. Because he had these funky, predator-looking prison bifocals that were as thick as Coke bottles. He took the 25 years. He's probably getting ready to come home right now. Clinton Matthew Ivey, 30 years old, and Aaron James Brennan, 22, both of the 2000 block of County Street in Portsmouth, face multiple charges related to the incident, including abduction, robbery, and malicious wounding. Police also arrested a 16-year-old male in connection with the robbery. Sally Perry was the woman's name, was shoved into a door and bound while the trio ransacked her home on Freedman Mill Road on Wednesday. They bound this woman. You know, abduction could be a lot of things. You could break into somebody's house to commit a robbery and they're just there while you're doing the robbery. That's abduction because you're essentially holding them against their will. When you bound somebody, when you tie them up, Duct tape them? That's a whole nother level of abduction. Police say Ivy, Brennan, and the juvenile went into Perry's home around 11:30 p.m. and demanded money along with her wallet and jewelry. They tied her up, took her credit cards and a small amount of money. They drove away in Perry's 1999 Chevy Cavalier, police say. Perry was able to get free and fled to a neighbor's house. Police also suspect the three in a burglary and arson of a residence in the 1700 block of Hoosier Road last month. In that incident, the home was burglarized, appliances were stolen, and the burglars burned down a shed and attempted to burn down the residence. You know, was it drugs that brought these three together? A 30-year-old, a 22, and a 16-year-old? Were they some sort of band of misfits, some sort of little street gang? Because they was out here doing some heinous shit. Brennan and Ivy were being held at the Western Tidewater Regional Jail with your boy, with me, without bond, and the teenager was held at the juvenile facility. Again, this story came out in March of 2009, and it's Google who I am just hearing from for the first time in a long time. You know, you hear something like this and you think to yourself, why would you even want to correspond with somebody like this? But he sounds like a real bad dude. I was locked up with the guy. I would never consider him a friend. He was somebody that I met along my journey, and somebody who I was interested to hear how his journey was going to end up. The last time that I saw Google and his co-defendant, I saw them both at receiving, a prison that no longer even stands. A prison called Mecklenburg, a prison that was the worst prison in my state many years ago. And it wasn't too great of a prison to be at when I ran into the two of them there, who were both getting ready for their respective sentences, one being 25 years, the other being 216 years. But running into them, they were buddies. They had that common denominator between the two of them, a shitload of time for some screwed up shit that they were doing. I didn't really kick it with them or Google. And as a matter of fact, I didn't want shit to do with him because I assumed that he was going to be a target. He had a target on his back because of what his charges were. And he was soft and weak, and I did not want to be around that at all. So we probably exchanged some pleasantries, and I went on my way, and I never saw either of them two again. It wasn't until I was released in 2015, started AfterPrisonShow, and a couple of years later, I, some kind of a way, end up getting in contact with Google through this prison email called JPay that back during the time when I was arrested was just coming out. I want to share with you one or two of these previous emails that we exchanged where this guy was sharing with me what his time was like. And I was surprised to hear what his time was like because, again, I figured this guy would have been putting lipstick on within a couple of years, but turns out he conformed. He got with the program and did what he needed to do to be able to survive a life sentence. And how do you wake up every day in prison knowing that you're going to die there, knowing that you're never going to come home? I want to share some of these emails. They go back as far as 2019. I'll start with this one. Hey, Joe. Sorry it took so long. Right after we got off of lockdown, an officer was assaulted and we went right back on lockdown for a bit. To answer your questions, I have actually not had a pen pal for quite some time. This had to be right around the time him and I were first getting in contact. And I asked him, hey, maybe by, sharing your experience a little bit, maybe you could get a pen pal from this. He ended up getting a pen pal, even a fiance. You'll hear about that in just a minute. I would very much enjoy having some pen pals. Again, it's quite nice to have a conversation that does not include stuff that only happens in prison. Also, keep in mind where this guy was at. I don't know where he's at right now, but he ended up going to a level 4, first of all, a place called Augusta. And then he ended up at Sussex. I don't remember. We've got two different Sussex prisons, Sussex 1 and Sussex 2. Another level 4 prison. Google had no choice but to go to a major because of the amount of time that he had. I asked him to share, some stories of what he was seeing during this time. And he says, a crazy story, huh? Let me think. I've seen a canine dog get beat up. I've seen someone get their jaw broke with a horseshoe. I think my favorite one that happened was when a dude got knocked out while talking on the phone and never let the phone go. His knees hit the floor which brought him back to consciousness. Then he started talking to the person on the phone again like it never even happened. Jesus Christ. Can you imagine? You're talking to your girlfriend on the phone. You're at a major institution. Somebody just comes up and knocks the shit out of you, knocks you out. You fall to the floor. Your knees hit the ground. That brings you back to consciousness, and you just keep carrying on with that phone call. Can't imagine what the repercussions for not doing shit about that were, or maybe he ended up stabbing the guy to death after the fact. Who's to know? I was actually fortunate when I left receiving. I went to Augusta. I did have an issue with a few gang members while I was there, but after 2 of them ran in my cell and we got to wrecking, then afterwards I caught one of them in their cell for some more wreck. I got enough respect that I never had another issue the whole time I was there, except for an issue that was something completely else. I'll tell you about that when I have more time to write the whole story. He never ended up sharing what that was. I have never thought about writing a book about my time in prison. I guess I asked him if he was thinking about that and the path that led to it. But I have joked that if I ever get my case back in court and give all this time back, I would want to put my story out there somewhere. You already know that I am good with words. I just don't have the knack to come up with a story that would grab someone's attention. Your story enough would do that. Just based on what I'm sharing with you guys here, I would think. To tell you the truth, being here at Sussex, even though it's a level 5 prison, time is easier here than at a lower level. So I guess he went from Augusta, which was a level 4, to Sussex, which was a level 5. I don't mind being stuck in my cell if I'm not at work, even though I'm at work 17 hours a day, 6 days a week. My day off, I just lay around and chill. I don't remember if I ever showed you a picture of my wife or not, but me and her got divorced about a year or so ago. I'm not upset about it at all. My life is the one on pause, not hers. My kiosk time is about to be up, so I'll let you go for now. Hope that all is well. Take care. Google. Again, I thought this guy was going to go to prison and be a victim. He went to prison and did exactly what he had to do. He had to fight when he had to fight. He had to demand respect. Seems like he did so. And had he not, this guy's time would have been completely different than it's sounding here. This was also in 2019. I remember I asked him because I had heard a story about a prisoner at this same prison where he was at who had killed his cell partner. He says, "Hey, Joe, it's weird you asked me about the guy that killed his cell partner. That happened in the pod next to mine. I'm glad to hear you are doing fairly well. I cannot complain." Wild to hear somebody say, "I cannot complain," knowing you are doing life in prison. I lost my job a few weeks ago. Someone stole some cake out of the freezer that was supposed to be for the staff, and they caught him. But the racist supervisor that didn't like me much said since it came out of my work area, I needed to be fired also. I will eventually get another job. Plus, I have a bit of money saved up. I want to speak on that real quick. The Virginia prison system, and maybe all prison systems, I don't know, but I know this particular state has a very racist prison system. I've heard of prisons like Wallen's Ridge, which is extremely racist toward black guys there. Wallen's Ridge is way out western Virginia in a place called Wise County. It is all country white dudes that work there. And from what I've heard, they don't like black dudes there at all. And then there's prisons like Sussex, which I've heard, and I could be wrong about this, is predominantly black. And I've heard that it's pretty racist toward the white guys there. And this guy Google is sharing that his racist supervisor fired him. So make of that what you will. I don't know if I told you, I did get another pen pal from Italy. We have been writing back and forth a lot. She actually seems great and writes nice long letters. It's funny. She asked me if I know Peaches. Google never knew Peaches. Peaches I met at Indian Creek. Google would never even see the light of day at a prison like that because it's just a level 2, which I do know him. Her name is Laura. I guess he's talking about the girl in Italy. And he says that he knows Peaches. I don't know how he knew him. Maybe they were at a higher level together before Peaches made his way to Indian Creek where I would run into him at. So I must say thank you. Other than that, everything is all right. We have been on lockdown since that guy died. Today is the first day we're able to start coming out for a little bit of rec. They didn't even give us a shower for the last 4 days. When you're on lockdown at those major institutions, you will be bird bathing in your cell for potentially days, maybe even weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. Damn, man. When all you have to look forward to is a freaking shower, that's a tough existence. I won't take up too much of your time. I know that you have been very busy. I'm real happy to know that you got out and started doing well for yourself. Do you still draw your comic strips, though? When I was locked up in the jail with Google, that was one thing that I was doing. I have been in the governor's office for clemency for over 10 months now. Not him personally. I imagine he's talking about his case. So I'm hoping for good news on that end. Take care of yourself. Hope all is well with you. Yeah, I mean, you're trying to get clemency, you're trying to get a reconsideration, you're trying to get an appeal. And when each of these things fail, you move on to the next thing. To be having your case at the governor's office for clemency probably means you failed in your effort to get an appeal, a reconsideration, and clemency is probably your last-ditch effort. Last week, I would hear from this guy for the first time in 6 years. I think the last time I heard from this guy, it looks like, was in 2020. Out of the blue, this guy hits me up. Short and to the point. Hey, Joe, I lost my kiosk privileges for 3 years. Just got them back. Are you still getting alerts for this app? I've actually been talking about you quite a bit in here. You're one of the success stories I like to tell people about. And also that you tried to help people out when you could. He asked if my phone number was still the same, and that was it. Buddy said he lost his kiosk privileges for 3 years. What did he do? He might have stabbed somebody. Again, here was a guy who conformed. I don't know what has gone on with this guy in the last 5 years, 6 years, damn near. But I've just gotten back in contact with him. I've got a handful of emails that we shared sporadically back around 2019 and 2020, where he shares that he ended up becoming engaged to a pen pal that he had, maybe the girl in Italy. Are they still together? Did they get married? Or did that fizzle out? Is he still at a level 5 prison? If you lost your kiosk privileges for 3 years and you just got them back, that sounds like you were in the hole for 3 years. So I would imagine this guy has not worked his level down, but instead it's remained right where it's been at. This guy might be at freaking Red Onion for all I know. And the one other thing, I wonder whatever happened with that clemency request, which I can all but guarantee probably got denied. Was that the straw that broke the camel's back with this guy that caused him to snap and react and say, screw it. I have exhausted all efforts for any type of hope in here. This was a guy that when I first met him, he was 22 years old. He was coming into the jail. He was a tall, goofy dude who thought he knew everything. Ended up with a nickname, Google. Who would end up getting his boots smoked 216 years, didn't kill somebody, but his case was still heinous nonetheless. Went up the road and had to fight. You're going to do one of two F words when you get to prison. One of them is fight, the other one is I can't say. But you're going to pick or choose, especially when you go to a level 4, especially when you go to a level 5. And it's either one of them two things you're going to do in an effort to survive. Certainly sounds like Google chose to fight. This guy might very well be an absolute freaking convict monster at this point. I haven't seen him in over a decade. All I have is this one funky mugshot from back in 2009 when he got arrested. I wonder how different he looks now. I wonder if we'd be able to get a picture of this guy. Just being curious. It's getting this email completely out of the blue that furthers this energy in me, this kinetic energy to keep the momentum moving forward for 2026 in all facets of my life, especially here on After Prison Show. And it's my hope to look at the things that I attempt to do content-wise here and see what works and what doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, that tells me y'all don't want to see that. And I'm going to work on sharing less of that and more of what I think that you guys want to see. I got a feeling maybe things like this you might want to see more of. Or maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to wrap this up here. I'm going to look forward to sharing any update that I can with this guy. He's been trying to call me. He says, I get a lot of spam calls, but I'm trying to pick those up now. If I can get a phone call with him, maybe even a video visit, maybe that would be something you would be interested in as well too. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did so, please leave a like and a comment letting me know exactly what you think of all things shared here. If you enjoyed this, let me know. And I'll look forward to bringing you an update just as soon as I possibly can in relation to this guy and what his time has been like. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted and make the most of every day. Peace!